Oh my goodness. I am so excited for this conversation today. I am here with my beautiful friend, Sarah V, and we have to talk about her name in a second. We were just talking before I recorded on that, but Sarah, how are you doing today?
I am doing very, very well. Thank you so much for having me as your guest here on your beautiful podcast. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would love to just dive right into your name because we met a couple years ago at a Women's Connection
Hmm.
meeting upstate. We're both in Delaware right now, but we had met at a local connection group and you had a different last name. It was a little bit longer.
A
And now
little
you're Sarah
longer.
V. So I would love, can
You're,
you just kind of talk a little bit about that and where that came
of
about?
course, yes. So as I was mentioning to you, so my ex married name was Vandister, which is always a very difficult name to spell because there should be spaces in between the van and the der and the stir, and they can never find it. So since I have been in my major transition of my life, uh, I, I, I kind of changed my name to VIE, which actually means life in French. And I was mentioning to you when I was working with I called it in my book, my mystic healer out in Big Sur, California. He was foreign and he could never pronounce my last name. So he kind of gifted me the name of V, but he was just spelling it with a V, period. But I changed it and it now has come into Sarah V, which I think is very appropriate, meaning, because it means life. And I feel like I'm really, kind of stepped into my life, or at least the next part of my life, because I had a beautiful life before I became Sarah V. So yeah, so it's kind of just appropriate that I have a bit shorter name, but it's so much easier just to spell.
It's so beautiful too. I mean, it really is. And that it means
Thank
life.
you.
I thought that was so really
Mm,
cool when I read that. And then when we were just talking about that, I'm like, that's so beautiful.
yeah, thank you. Yes, and yeah, and I love French, and I speak really, really fluent French after a couple glasses of wine. So it's but I did study French, and I was an au pair when I was, in my, like, 900 years ago, when I was in my 20s.
Oh my
So I
gosh, that's
lived there
so
for a
cool.
year. Hmm.
So you lived in
I
France?
lived in I lived in France. It's just so interesting because I'm writing this new book, and all these things that I'm sharing are now kind of being unearthed. Like, oh, I remember that. Yeah. So that was a really pivotal part of my life. When I was in my 20s, I lived with a family in Toulouse, which is just south of Paris, and I lived looking after two little boys for for a year. I lived in France, so I was no one knew that I was American, so it was very cool.
Oh my goodness. And how did that come about? Like what made you want to go live in France and be an au pair? Like was that your
Um,
first job doing that?
I just thinking back on that, I really believe that it was really my mother that was kind of wanting to live through me. And so she kind of like booted me out the door. Of course, there was no cell phones. There was nothing but, like, a telephone number on a piece of paper, the address of where I was supposed to be staying. And I think it was more her dream through me than it was mine, because I'm like, okay, and it was that point was a really, really pivotal point of my life. Like, now that I kind of remember, because it was finally me, discovering something on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I had no idea how to, you had to take the ferry across, the channel, and then get the train, and then my train was late, and then I missed connections. So it was just a beautiful time where I started to kind of trust myself to do that, because, my mom was like, and she never really worried. She was like, okay, well, call me when you get there. She was English. So that was my English accent. She, she, would, she just basically said, just let me know when you're there. So yeah, but it was an amazing experience. And I've in my book that hopefully will be out in, by the summer. It's just, there were so many instances there that awakened me, and I didn't know that it was awake. Some were very traumatic things, which I will share in my book, which I do share in my book. But some things were just like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing experience. And it just kind of, because I love travel and I love seeing new places and kind of being one with wherever I'm going. I'm actually going to Italy in May.
Hmm.
So
Love
yeah.
interesting because I call them pivotal moments as well. And I
Yes.
actually, my sophomore year of college, I gave my parents an ultimatum. And I don't know if they would recall it that way, but this is how I recall it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I was either going to take a semester off to travel
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
I was going to do a semester abroad. And the only place that I could go when I was at the University of Delaware becoming a teacher was Scotland. And at the time,
Mm.
I was like, I don't even know what Scotland is, where it is. Like, I thought Paris. That was my initial, like, I have no
Yeah.
idea about the world, but I hear about Paris. I want to go there, Eiffel Tower. And I went. So that is a pivotal moment for me because exactly
Mm,
like you said,
yeah.
there were no cell phones. Like my mom and I had communication by email. I
Mm-hmm.
lived in a dorm. I was on my own. I was 18, so I could drink at the time, but I couldn't drink in the,
Mm-hmm.
like there was just so much awakening, just like you said,
Mm,
during
mm,
that time while I was there away from my family, a lot of
mm-hmm.
trusting of myself that I was going
Yes.
to figure it out. And looking back, I just feel like I didn't know how courageous I was to actually
Yes.
do that at that age and to stand up and say, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I have this calling.
I love that. Yes. So, and I think when we are in the pivotal moments of our lives, we don't realize that they're pivotal until we come out onto the other side. I've had so many pivotal moments now that I'm looking back and I'm looking at my history. And, the only reason why a lot of, especially women, um, don't allow themselves to have pivotal moments is because of fear, or because of how our adventures will affect other people. That whole idea of putting other people's um, needs before ours, and who doesn't do that, especially moms. And I think that we really do ourselves a discredit for not taking more chances and doing things like that, because it's always like, oh well, I can't go because of whatever. But I'm in this place where I am transforming my life, and I'm taking every single opportunity now without anybody holding me back. Of course, I still have my children, they're all grown and living their own lives, but I know that I didn't take chances and do things like that, traveling, because obviously because of them.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I want to dive into something because
Yeah.
I was looking at an article that you wrote because I was, creeping on you on your website. Oh, I was like, oh, loving all the things, Sarah V. And
Mm-hmm.
I came across this article that you did for Modern Mom. And
Mm-hmm.
just the headline itself, I mean, this is a podcast for moms, but I know that so many women who aren't moms are listening to this podcast and relating because a lot of the things that we talk about are so relatable to everyone. But the headline is Heal Yourself to Heal Your Kids. And I just thought that was so powerful. And the
Mm,
things that you gave on how you could do that.
mm,
You talk a
mm.
little bit about what does that mean to heal yourself?
So, this is what is, I think, the pivotal moment, when we are, stepping into our own healing. So healing ourselves first. We always think that, oh, well, if I can heal somebody else, or if I can change somebody else, then it's actually going to heal me. But it's the other way around. Like when you start healing who you are, your traumas, your triggers, or whatever. We've all had trauma, whether you say that you've had a perfect childhood or not. We have all had traumas, a lot of research that I'm doing for my book. But I think that, so healing yourself, and with that, I mean, kids don't necessarily mean that you have to have biological children. So when you heal yourself, you actually change the energy inside of you, because I'm an energy healer. I'm all about, inner energy. And when we heal ourselves, we actually change the energy of the world. Because what happens is, when we change the energy inside of us, we mirror that back. So we're actually, when we heal ourselves, we actually heal our children, meaning the world. So,
Wow.
and it all starts here. It doesn't start from trying to change your husband or trying to change your children. The responsibility is ours to heal ourselves. I thought, I had a fairly normal background as a child. My basic needs were always met. But what I didn't know is that there was a lot of emotional trauma in my life. And, I didn't have any sexual abuse, physical abuse, but I did have a tremendous amount of emotional abuse. The abuse is kind of a too strong of a word, but neglect, let's just say emotional neglect. And until now, I'm 58 years old. And until now, I have to say that I have healed some of the deepest layers of not of my childhood. The experience that I had in France, there was a very traumatic experience that happened to me. And but what I'm noticing is, when I've healed this, I have changed, who I attract, how I help, I call them no matter what women. And it has shifted the world. Yeah, you can't see anything, but it really has shifted the world. Who I spend my time with. But it all starts from ourselves, and because of fear, again, it's easier to fix somebody else, because then we have to look at what is difficult, what is uncomfortable, what is traumatic, what is painful inside of us.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did. I feel all of that, because I do strongly believe in that. And I think it's important to know too, like, trauma doesn't always have to mean like something physically, sexually, something like that. Like you said,
No.
emotional, like you
Yeah.
said, we all have some form of it, even if we don't know it, and it lives inside of our body. Even if we don't know it lives there. And so
Yes.
once we start to do the work, which I would love if you would, you talked about looking at those things, but even just share, like, like, if a mom's like, what do you mean do the work? I don't know. What does that even mean? I don't have time to do work. Are you kidding? Like, I have all these other things to do. And a lot of the time we don't put ourselves first. And so, and that is, I think, like, when I had my kids and they were younger, I thought I always had to be with my kids. I had this story of how a good mother was and how I should be as a mother. And not that there was anything wrong with that. I just had this impression of how I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to act, how I was supposed to parent.
Right.
And
So,
we're
right.
stories, and it was stories. But like, how do people work on that? How do people work on healing themselves
Yeah,
if they don't even know where to start?
it's because I'm not sure what your age is, but when the ancient age of 58, but I don't feel ancient. I feel
I'm
like I'm in my
44, by the
30s.
way. I'm proud. I'm
Okay.
44.
Yeah, so I think like 40, in your 40s, that's when we start understanding like what is feeling resistant in our body. Every emotion we have has a different energetic sensation to it. So I feel as if my 50s, just everything started to come to a head, if you will. I was feeling, I'll just share this, is that in the last 2 years I left a my 30-year marriage. But I left, but we're best friends now. We are absolutely loving and supporting each other, but just in a different space.
Yeah.
And that was something that now I look back is that I felt as if I was about to explode emotionally because I didn't feel, I mean, I call him my Wasband rather than I hate the word ex. So I call him, so he's my
Oh my
Wasband.
God. Did you make that word up? Like, did you?
I
I
did.
love that. I
Because
love it.
I don't like the word ex and divorce. I like husband and uncoupling. We're just kind of uncoupling, but we are very loving and supportive. But in my marriage that I was a completely different person, and I felt very restricted. And all my trauma and pain and things started to just there was no place for it to go. Because obviously I met my husband, well, he was my husband then. I met him in a completely different energy. I came into the marriage wanting somebody to, to keep me safe and to always be there for me, to be a beautiful provider, which, oh my God, he was like the most amazing provider. And he was a lovely father to my 4 children. We both wanted 4 children. So I came in with similar energy. I feel like he actually was very energetically familiar to my mother, who was, very controlling and, this had to be this, and you couldn't show any emotions, and emotions were weaknesses, and showing any kind of tears was like, take it outside kind of feeling. So that's what I came into the marriage with. So as the marriage, of course, then you have the years that you're always with the children, and we traveled all over the world, and we had beautiful homes in Puerto Rico and here in Delaware. We had a beautiful life, but it was always about the children. And when I realized that, when all the kids kind of grew up and they went on their own way, I realized that my pain and trauma that I had throughout just came to a head right there. So the answer to your question, and I always forget the question after I go on and on, was that I think that when you know it's coming through and you need to deal with it, And again, I look at everything through sensations in your body. When we're feeling stuck, or we're getting triggered, or we're defensive, or we're feeling angry, or whatever it is something that has not been healed inside of us. And I do a lot of inner child healing, which has changed my life, because any kind of energy that we have that is guilt, resentment, anger, whatever negative or heavy emotion comes in is your unhealed inner child. When you feel happiness, joy, love, especially, it is something that's your esoteric energy of who you really are. All those other emotions are inherited or something that you've learned from family of origin. And in my research for my book is that children in their DNA, they hold on to 3 generations of unhealed pain and trauma. So we not only are, we are, are attaching to energy from our parents, but we are also attaching to, sorry for the ping, we are also attaching to the energy in our DNA from past lives, from, our grandparents, from their grandparents. So it's fascinating. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, this doesn't feel right. This feels uncomfortable. I don't like that. And the automatic response is to push it away. Yeah, and believe me, I call them empty fillers. Like I filled my empty with things of on the outside. I exercised too much, and some people are like, oh, I'd love to. No, I exercised so much that my body started to fall apart. I shopped. I wouldn't, I didn't eat enough. I wasn't anorexic, but I didn't allow my body to eat.
Yeah.
So, and because I was like, oh my God, I know if I do this, then I'm going to be happy. But actually what happens is if you heal inside of you, you don't need any of those outside fillers. So if we have an addiction, that is pain and trauma that we've experienced as a child. So long story short, I think that it's a feeling. We start getting calm and quiet in our quiet center and seeing what doesn't feel right, what feels heavy, what are we trying to push away that we don't allow ourselves to feel. Every single one of us has pain and trauma in our lives, and it's up to us whether we want to uncover it, unearth what is coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. And please, you are going around, but
Yeah.
like
Wow. Wow.
coming
Wow.
back. It is coming back. So you can just
Because
ignore my question and whatever you feel
yeah,
called
but
to do.
I just,
I
this is
love it.
just like, I just want people to understand this. Like, yeah, we can all, because I did it all. I feel like the grandma, I don't know what your age group of your listeners are, but this is like grandmotherly advice is like, oh my God, this makes so much sense now of this searching that I felt so uncomfortable where I was. So what did I do? Oh, I used to have like 4 closets full of clothes that I never wore
Yeah.
because I love clothes, but it was, I was trying to fill something that would never be filled. And I did
Yeah.
all of it. So this is where addictions start, is because this like this, you're not being mindful enough to realize that it's actually something internal that will never, ever, 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 ever be filled with something on the outside.
Yeah.
And
And
now I'm like,
I look at it as
what?
like a mask, like you're masking it. You're masking your pain, you're
Yes.
masking your emotions. Like you said, like your mom or your husband, your
Yeah.
husband,
Wasband.
was like, oh, no emotions. Like we don't have time for that here.
Yeah.
And so it was just, you just masked it. Okay, fine. I'll go
Yeah.
shopping. I'll be happy when I'm shopping.
Exactly.
I'll be
Yes.
happy when I'm, doing all these things and saying yes to all this stuff. And just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it looks great on the outside, but on the inside, you're
Mm,
completely falling apart.
exactly. And that's when we know, like, and I can't overemphasize when and I don't like labels, but any kind of negative emotion is your unhealed inner child. Any kind, it doesn't matter, because when we are born, we are already happiness, joy, peace, calm, and especially love. That's who we are. That is our esoteric energy. Everything else we have learned. It's a learned behavior from unhealed pain and trauma that, our parents or their grandparents, they just never learned and or they've never healed. And so the pattern continues. And, I'm at a place where I have cut the cords to the patterning of, of ancestral pain. I am the one, there's always one in the family that tends to be the one that cuts the pattern. And
Mhm.
then the pattern doesn't continue.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm sure my children have picked up, some things, but I was just working with my editor this morning and I realized, like, oh my God, I really just let my children be who they wanted to be. There was at the beginning, I was trying to continue the pattern, but then my son, my middle son, my third boy, just said, I don't want to do this anymore, Mom. I'm like, that was like the pivot. That was a pivotal moment there that he's
We
like, Mom,
dive
I
into
don't want to
that?
do it.
Can we dive into that? Like, I think
Yeah.
that's so powerful, especially like I was going to ask you, like, have your kids, your students, have your kids noticed this shift, or what have
Oh
they
my God.
thought about this, or what are their feelings? But like, I would love if you talk a little bit about that, because I think it's
Sure.
so easy as parents to want to try and control your kids and say, this is how you have to be. And these are the things that you have to do. But what was he
Mm,
like? Okay, no, I don't want to do this. Like, he was able to stand up for himself. That's amazing.
yeah. And so just a little history is that my mother lived through me. So whatever she didn't experience in her life, she wanted me to do it so that she would feel better about her life. So I rode horses all my life from age 4 until I was in my 20s. I mean, but I didn't want to do it. I just went along with it because that was something, this was my pain. Like if I did it, then I would get validated and I would feel love. So I did it. And I hated it. I wasn't good. I sucked at it, excuse my language, but I was really bad. Sucked at it.
You are fine.
Um,
Be
okay.
authentically you. If you cuss, you cuss. It's fine.
Okay, good. So I wasn't good at it because I was always nervous, because if I messed up, then there was that chance that I wasn't going to get the validation and the love that I needed, that I thought I needed for myself. So the pattern continued. And then when I started having children, that was what my children started to do. And my third son, who is my musician, and he has really long hair, is beautiful, like beautiful long hair. He lives out in California, and I'm a grandmother, so I'm glammy. Um, so my lovely little granddaughter. So he was the most I don't like the word difficult, but he was the most expressive child of all of mine. And when he didn't want to do something, he didn't do it. And I remember he was riding, one of our ponies, and he just was not wanting to do it. So he was just kind of slouched over. So I said to him, and it was the same thing that my mom said to him, said to me, like, Avery, you look like a sack of potatoes. And he was 4 or 5, and he just stopped his pony, and he looked at me. He literally just like took off his hat, threw his helmet on the ground, jumped off the horse, and he's like, Mommy, I don't want to do this anymore. And he marched himself into the house. And it was like this like major wake up call, like, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing. I'm literally right after that, my ponies went out into the grass and they lived happily ever after, never being ridden again. I mean, my daughter rode too, and you know, she rode too, and was just sort of, I was like, oh my God, I'm creating the same pattern, but it was because of my son saying, Mommy, I don't want to do this anymore. It totally woke me up. And
And I'm
right
like,
there,
and for you to not even have liked, I'm just surprised that you even had horses, because
oh,
you
I
said
know.
you didn't even like riding. You hated it all into your 20s. And then you went out and got horses when you were, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, like after you were married. I don't know. Like, that is
Yeah,
just, it's so
yeah, it
crazy.
was.
And it took your son to say that, to be like, to actually
Yep,
realize,
but you
like,
but
oh
you
my God.
don't know when, we're so asleep to the fact of continuing the same patterns, even though it has, damaged us in a way. We still continue the pattern because it's what we know. It's our, neuro-linguistic programming that we have, the neural pathways in our brain that are just, no, this is my identity. I am a writer, and this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, oh my God, like, who am I going to be if I don't have ponies and horses? And even though I was feeling like, oh, I hate this, like, pony club, and like, that I had to eat, breathe, and sleep pony club, and the competitiveness. And I think back, like, oh my God, I was doing the same thing. So
Wow.
I stopped it there. And this last chapter that I'm writing right now, um, is all about how I allowed my children to have completely different passions and just live a life the way that they wanted to, rather than what I thought they wanted, that, how I thought they needed to behave. And I think we all do it as parents. And believe me, I know that they've picked up many, things as parents. That's what happens. But I have to say that they all, like my oldest son, he's a surfer. I mean, that's not his job, but he has, for a side job, he has this amazing surfboard company. And so he shapes surfboards, and he does all the distribution, on the East Coast for surfboards. My daughter has this incredible love for animals. And, she was like the one that we would go to the SPCA every other weekend because we needed to save a dog. And, there's a whole chapter about that. My third son, who was the musician, he was just, we kind of understand one another, that our energies are very the same. He's very emotional. He's very romantic. He's just my very creative one.
Yeah.
And then my youngest son races for Hyundai. He's on a race team, and he's just always done his own thing. So they're all very different, because I'm like, okay, just do whatever. And when my son was playing, do you know what a zither is? It's one of those, yeah. So even we would buy him a zither for his Christmas present, because that's what he wanted, and he would go to some Indian guy and play the zither. I mean, all these memories come in, and it's just like, oh my God, yeah, I actually did just let them. And the whole point of the chapter was that I wish I had had that experience. Like, what would I have been if I had had the opportunity to live my life the way that I wanted to, rather than what my mother said that I should do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had no choice, because she was like, no, you're riding. That's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh. Yeah. So, and I know you were talking about the women like listening to, in the demographics and stuff like that. I mean, it starts like early 30s, like up, like it's like 30 to like 55, 60 is like
perfect. Yeah.
the demographic. And so I love that, because there's so many things for myself as a younger mom, when my kids were little, that I wish that I had known or done. And you never know, like you're doing your best. We're all doing our best. And looking
And
back,
that's the thing. Yeah.
there's not things that you can change. Like you can't change that past. You can't change what
No.
happened. But moving forward, like what can moms do like now? Like if people have like young kids at home, like how did you let your kids figure it out? Because I think you said fear. I think it's the parents' fear of, oh my God, my kid's gonna fail.
Yeah.
I want them to not have pain, but letting them become who they want to be, and not push them in a certain direction, but be open to, hey, let's try all this different stuff. And giving your kids permission to say, hey, you're just figuring it out. You're not failing. It's feedback for what you like to do. Have
Well,
like
I
some
think
kind of advice, or,
I don't know
grandma
whether
knowledge.
yeah, I mean, I am not an expert like mother. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
an expert mother, and I'm just trying to think, how did because I was so programmed into traditions, into doing the right thing, having them all be riders, and like I really don't know what I did. Like, I mean, if I was like that now, I would know just to start, like, getting quiet in your stories. Like, what is the story that perhaps creates a fear of, if your child doesn't do whatever it is that you want, what is the story? And it's usually about fear. Like, oh my God, what is so and so going to think? And maybe your parents are still alive, and like you're afraid of judgment from others if your child is not, this amazing person. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really, that's a really, really good question, because I don't know quite what a step would be, because I wasn't taking it when, I was raising my children. I was kind of, there was this force that I kept feeling inside of me, that it was like a voice, and perhaps the voice was my inner child saying, oh, don't do it that way. don't do it that way. You know that it damaged you. Don't do it. It's I think that's what I mean, it sounds kind of woo-wooey, but I think there was this voice, and the voice was an energetic feeling that I had in my body whenever I would do it. Like that, the wake up call with my son, I think I was fairly asleep before that happened. But I think with my son, it was this huge wake up call. And my inner child, this little girl, which was in my little children's book, um, this inner child was almost like, yay, she didn't make him do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so I think, looking back is that I was very in tune, even, I mean, a little bit, I mean, I'm so in tune now, but I think I was always in tune, in connection with, like, oh, well, it doesn't feel right. It was feeling. And, when you have fear in your body, it's a sensation, it's a frequency that we feel in our body. So if it doesn't feel right, it's most likely because it's not right, or it's going to cause pain. But maybe it's just to recognize, what is that story that I'm telling myself if my child, doesn't get an A+ on his test, or he goes and chooses playing the sitar instead of playing, a trumpet.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? Like, who's
Right.
making these rules?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I
it's
think
like,
it's powerful because it is, and it's listening to your inner intuition and your inner knowing. And
hmm
instead of pushing it down and listening to all the outside noise, it's getting quiet and listening to yourself. And I think that's why, even just coming up with this, the reawakened mom, it's like you're
I
awake,
love
you're
that.
awake now.
Yes,
Like you
yes,
are awake, and whatever that means for you, you are awake to your emotions, you're awake to your
I
feelings, you're awake
love
to
it.
who you are, you're
Yes,
awake to what you want to do with your life, like how you want to parent, like your career, your love, like whatever it is, it's like your
hmm
eyes are open. Like
I
your
love
eyes
it.
are open, your heart is open, your ears are open, and you're like, this is me, and you're ready to come back to who you really are. Because
hmm
you literally, I think so many women forget who they are, who they truly are, not who they're
But
supposed to be, like we've been talking about, and those
hmm
stories, but like really, like who are you when you don't care
mm,
what everybody else is thinking? Like, who are you? What makes you happy? What makes you feel
yeah,
joy? And it's
hmm
getting quiet and figuring out what that is for
yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly. And, when no matter what, women come and work with me, they are in a place where they're just like opening their little flower, the lotus flower, which is, in our root chakra, where they're just kind of opening to the possibility that there's somebody more than what they're used to. I absolutely love the word reawakened, because the majority of, our society is asleep. Like, we have no idea. I mean, if a very asleep person came and listened to this podcast, they'd be like, what is she talking about?
Yeah.
But I think, your beautiful women, and maybe men, that come in and listen to this, understand what reawakening is, or maybe they have curiosity to another possibility.
Yeah.
And I love that word. It has so much power to it. Reawakened. I mean, oh my, and rather than, what is the religious thing where you, uh it slipped my mind. Um anyway, doesn't matter. But I think that, reawakened is so powerful, and especially I wish I had was as awakened as I am now when I was in my 30s, because, that I had already had 4 children by then, and we were busy. They went to a private school that was an hour away, that I had to drive them every morning and then pick them up, and they were, so we had to like coordinate our day. And I was very into nutrition back then as well, and I would always make these beautiful meals. So I had no time to do anything,
Yeah.
but my creativity was in my cooking. Um, much, my kids, wanted hamburgers and hot dogs and stuff, and they would have like you know, butternut squash turmeric soup. And my son, who didn't want to ride, would always be like, Mom, what is this, baby
Yeah.
food? It's like,
Right.
you know, and I had this beautiful bread, and so that I don't think they appreciated that. But but the reawakening is like, I really, really started to like reawaken, even, when I was still in the context of my marriage, probably about, 6 years ago, that I was like, wait a minute, this is not feeling right anymore,
Yeah.
because my energy had changed.
Yeah.
So, but the reawakening is a beautiful, beautiful word. I love that. And
Yeah.
especially moms, because we don't really put those two together. Because what's interesting is, I love reawakened, because most of women moms, it's like the busy mom.
Hmm.
This is how we identify ourselves, rather than like, oh no, I can reawaken into whatever I want,
Yeah.
rather than the busy mom. Okay, well, yeah, we know that. So
Yeah.
the busy mom, the busyness can also be a way that we fill our empty, is just to be busy.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I felt that a lot. And I think part of this is like me even just sharing all of that for myself, because so many times people see things on social media, or they see you doing all these things. And they're like, oh my gosh, like your life is so perfect. And you live in this like fantasy world and, everything. And it's like, no, like I'm just like you, that I'm just like you. But like
Mm,
maybe I can handle things differently, or maybe I manage things differently, or maybe I do all these things and then I fall apart. But it's like we
mm,
all are going through the same things. And I think it's important for us as women, especially, to share all of that, because when you see
hmm.
social media and you see, some women just share their perfect lives, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
real. And then you, as a woman, might start to compare yourself to someone who isn't even sharing
Hmm.
their truth. They're
Yeah.
just sharing what they want you to see. And I think
Right.
it's important to share our stories of, the hard and the struggle, but like how we can overcome, because that's
Mm,
beautiful. And it's also
hmm.
powerful to our stories.
Yes. Yes. Well, I was brought up as my mother was English. And so, the way that I healed any emotions that were coming in was to have a cup of tea. Oh, Sarah, do have a cup of tea. So I drank a lot of tea.
Ugh.
And, but we had to have the image to everybody on the outside. Oh my God, the children are perfect and they dress beautifully. But we never went deeper than that, and I think that is what we see on Instagram, we see on Facebook. And I am one, if anybody ever follows me on Instagram or Facebook, that I do show imperfections. Like my favorite one, because I have this women's healing circle every Sunday, and after Christmas, everybody wanted. I'm like, oh my God, my holiday was so well. Well, I came in there and I'm like, tell me one thing that was not perfect about your Christmas.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, and then this happened. And I'm like, that's reality. Like, I had the weirdest Christmas ever. So I want to see my life and actually thank the imperfections that are coming into my life. Like, thank you,
Yeah.
because it's real, it's authentic. I am not one. I mean, I do like to look nice, but I will post pictures, and I think you've done that as well, without any makeup. And like, yes,
Yeah.
we need a world where we accept imperfections, and we have a different relationship with failure as well. Same, we're all out. So what did you get? What's the grade that you got? I mean, I was not a great student, because I had another story that was my trauma, that my brother teased me about being stupid about math. So, I didn't want to even look at math. I didn't even, I think I got D's all the way through, because I was believing in a story.
Yeah.
So, I love Brene Brown's book of the gifts of imperfection. I love when people are real, and they show their imperfections, but that's not what our society is all about.
Right.
It's all
Absolutely.
about perfection, and how beautiful your skin is, and how many, whatever the perfection is. And I wish our society was more accepting of imperfection.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Our conversation, I think we could probably talk all day,
Oh
and
yeah.
like Zoom recording would be like, I'm sorry, there's no space left to save this
I
because it's too
know.
long. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I can feel your energy coming through. I know that the women and the moms listening are just going to gain so much great information
Yeah.
from your story, from what you're sharing, from just, coming from a place of love. I think that
Mhm.
is truly, what this is all about. So I thank you so much. Is there
Oh my
anything
gosh,
we
thank you.
haven't touched on or that you want to say, like, okay, there's one last thing?
No, I mean, not, I mean, like I said, this is just so fascinating to me, but no, I think we've covered it. But if it's okay with you, just to share my website,
Oh, sure.
is that okay?
Oh,
So,
please.
because the reason why, so SarahVie.com, and there's a free gift on there for everybody who puts in their email. It's actually 3 ways to start healing our inner child. It's just a free gift. And also with that, you then can be on my mailing list, that I will send you a Zoom link every Sunday, or actually it goes out Friday and then Sunday morning. It's a healing circle that I have. It's totally free. And it's just a way, it's just like a forum. I have, I don't know, 20 people on there every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And it's just a really beautiful way to know about imperfection, to understand about emotions. And it's a beautiful gathering of, like-minded, no matter what women. So
Yeah.
that's it, that's on my website, sarahv.com, or you can follow me on my Facebook, and on my Instagram as well.
Cool. And I'll make sure I put all those things in the show notes as well, so people can just click on them and go
Perfect.
find you and all
Yeah,
the
great.
amazing things that you do. So, but last question for
Hmm.
you. I'd
Yeah.
love to end with, as women, we do not celebrate ourselves enough. We love to celebrate other people and be their cheerleaders. But what is something that you love about yourself, Sarah V, right now?
Oh, right now. That I don't believe in any of my old limited stories that I thought were real. I have completely changed, the way what I believe in. And so now I'm actually, my vibration frequency is myself,
Mm.
nobody else. So yeah, so not believing in my old stories. I'm just so proud of myself that I know my truth now.
I love that. I feel that. So congratulations on that
Yeah,
for
thank
sure. I mean,
you.
that's not an easy feat. So good for you.
No, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been such a gift to spend this time with you. And I can't wait for this episode to go live. And thank you so much, Sarah, for being here today and
Oh
sharing.
my gosh. Well, thank you for creating the awakened mom. I love it. I love that word. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.